Hi, good evening. We've just been in executive session, so can I ask somebody to make a motion to return to public?
Motion to return to public.
Cool. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, good evening. Welcome to a meeting of the Board of Education of Somerset Hills. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a meeting of the Board of Education of Somerset Hills at which formal action may be taken. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Baker?
Here.
Ms. Cooper? Here. Mrs. Brenda?
Here.
Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Ms. Nathans?
Here.
Mrs. Santoro?
Here.
Mrs. Tober? Here. Ms. Virtue?
Here.
Mrs. Wright?
Here.
Mrs. Lees?
Here.
Right, we received one piece of correspondence yesterday through email from Cheryl Mataluna.
Okay, report of the superintendent.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to kick things off this evening with our middle school reporter. Mr. Tober, is that you?
Yes.
All right.
Ella as well.
Hi, Ella, didn't see you.
Okay, so first, the Patriots Pen. Congratulations to all of the Patriots Pen winners from our school. The annual Patriots Pen Essay Contest, sponsored by the VFW, has concluded its 2019-2020 theme of What Makes America Great. And the three winners for the 6th through 8th grade are Nathan Lim, John Tober, and Alexander Tosca. Next, for the spelling bee, so our BMS 3rd annual spelling bee happened just a couple weeks ago on January 23rd. 7th grader Pradnesh Thopay won the competition. Lila Beckerman in 7th grade came in 2nd, and Brianna Ho in 8th grade came in 3rd. This year there were many participants from grades 5 through 8, and the winner will be able to move on in the spelling bee to the next level of competition. And finally, the updates from the Culture and Climate Committee. So the Culture and Climate Committee is continuing to meet monthly with Mr. Habermas, Mrs. Rizzuto, and Ms. Garofalo to come up with ideas to make our school a better place. So we spent a few lunch times creating new ideas, and one of them was a new banner for the outside of our school. So this banner, which was designed by the students and Mrs. Chafee, the art teacher, has a handprint of every student in the building, and the handprints are done in the house colors, which are red, orange, navy, and blue. The Culture and Climate Club also came up with our house handshakes, which is a specific handshake for each of the 4 houses, and everyone in the house got to learn it.
2 weeks ago, we had a public community service hour count where teachers counted up all the hours of community service that the students had so far. The hours were counted in the 4 different houses: Duke, Princeton, Rutgers, and Penn State. And the winner was Princeton with 379 hours. In addition to this, the teachers counted up all of the students' hours of community service, and the total was over 1,000 hours so far. There was also other ways to earn house points, such as doing a prayer beat for every point scored in the Super Bowl and bringing in personal care items. Penn State donated the most personal care items for February. That put Penn State in their first monthly win. For our student-faculty basketball game, it was a huge success. The event was a red-out event, and students wore their Web Love New Jersey shirts that we've been selling. Students attended to see BMS students compete against our best teachers. The finals were between the 8th graders and the teachers. Our entrance fee was a donated food pantry item. We also collected many foods from Nourish, New Jersey, and Morristown. And thanks to our student coaches and our student commentators who helped make this an exciting game. For the Earth Science team, we're doing great this year. Congratulations to all the students who qualified. Max Bozak, Michael Carazzola, Kurt Hunziker, Matthew Oliveira, Trevor Sardis, and Evan Seeker. We are currently in 3rd place in the state of New Jersey. And finally, our Dance for Heart took place on Valentine's Day. We brought $180 in, which was raised for HeartWorks, and 22 students and teachers participated in the after-school dance-a-thon. And thank you to Ms. McGinn for organizing everything.
And thank you both for all that you share with us month after month. Thank you.
Hello. Hope everybody had a wonderful February. So I first wanted to let you guys know, because I think you've been following along with my college process-ish.
I heard something.
I'm very happy to announce that I will be attending New York University this fall, so so first, we recently just, we just got back on Sunday, but Harvard Model Congress just came to a close. It was the 35th one, which was really exciting. It happened from the 20th to the 23rd, and basically for those of you that don't know what Harvard Model Congress is, it's basically a congressional simulation. So 1,500 high school students come together. They're assigned a certain role. So for example, in our school we had one student represent Bernie Sanders, another one represented Lindsey Graham. So like basically they get assigned a role and they get to go into different committees, whether that's House or Senate, or there's a presidential cabinet and a West Wing, and basically you get to debate and see how our government works. It was a really big success. We took 32 students, and out of the 32 students, 11 were awarded by the HMC staff. So it's a pretty big deal, and yeah, overall it was a really awesome experience. So I really recommend to encourage your kids also to do something like that, just because it's a really awesome experience to get to meet people from different states and just really get to see how your government works. Also, the Drowsy Chaperone, it will be premiering this Friday at 7 p.m. It will be also premiering on Saturday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. and then on Sunday again at 2 p.m. So make sure that you stay tuned and go watch them. They've been working so hard. And it's also the last musical for this year, which is sad, but that's another reason to really go out and give them some real support. And then going along that, Madrigals was recently featured on NPR's From the Top on February 10th. That's really, really awesome. So if you're interested in hearing them, you can go on Twitter, and there should be a link where you can go to I think it was a recording, so you could take a look at that. And then we actually had something really exciting. Sophomore Sophie Naz was recently published her new book, Forever or Never, on Amazon, and she actually had her book signing here at the Media Center. And Dr. Nigel was there, and her friends came along, and it was really awesome, particularly to see a sophomore, make those kind of achievements. It really, I think inspires us all to, go for what we really want to do. So, she's not here today, but I think she definitely deserves some credit for that, because that's awesome. And then we also had our Somerset Hills Talent Show, which was really fun. We had over 20 different acts, and the winner was the Bedwell Band performing one of Mr. Thurlow's original songs. But overall, it was really great just to see everybody come together, and it was Bedwell and Bernard's, and just to see everybody come together was really awesome. So sadly, that was my last talent show, but I hope that the tradition definitely continues as well. And the Women Inspiring Success and Empowerment Club, or known as WISE, they're currently doing something really, really cool, and basically they're taking donations for feminine products and makeup to donate to women's shelters. So they're going to be making kind of if you guys know what an Ipsy bag is, it's typically they put some samples and some products, and they'll actually be going out to giving them to some women's shelters. So if you guys are interested in donating anything at all, there are boxes right in the main entrance when you come in. So I really, really recommend donating, because those are things that we can make a really big change in anybody's lives if we, apply ourselves. So I think it would be really awesome to have any kind of contributions. And kind of moving on to sports, fencing, the girls' saber team are 3-time defending state champs. So that's incredible. Our sports teams in general have been doing really well this year, but congratulations. And actually Bridget Lynn is also here, so I think we should definitely give a round of applause for the fencing team. And going along with that, the basketball team, so the boys saw their senior night on the 13th, in which they beat Warren Tech. And then the girls saw their senior night on the 11th against Melville. Unfortunately, they lost, but they definitely deserve the credit. They've been doing so well this year, so in general, we've been really trying. And wrestling, the regular season is now over, but some of the players have won districts and are now in regions, with which 3 players have won. So that means we're doing pretty good. And then it's still going. So I will probably come back next month and kind of let you guys know how that unrolled. And then kind of coming to a close, I really wanted to recognize the guidance department this year. This particular meeting, because they've been doing such a great job at really reaching out to students to get them to come to them, kind of in a way like almost, really advertising in a way that we do have people who can supply help if needed. And they've also been, with the Stress Less Club, they've actually really been giving out, for example, for Valentine's Day, they give away wooden roses and sold like cards and candies to students. And it's just really awesome what they're doing, that they're really making an effort to reach out to students. And then going along with Valentine's Day, we also sold Minos empanadas, and we'll be donating all profits to the Amazonian Project, especially after the devastating fires they experienced recently. So we're really looking forward to that. And then finally, just some last things to look forward to. The senior fashion show will be on Saturday, March 7th at 7 p.m. So if you are interested in attending at all and watching the seniors kind of walk down the runway, then you can go ahead and buy tickets. I'm not exactly sure where, because it's a little that part is a little bit big to me. But I believe if you go onto the Twitter or the HSA website,
Yes,
I
and I
think you
think
can
there's
find them
something
there.
in the Friday folder as well.
Yeah, so I think if you're really interested in watching that, it's a really awesome experience. Basically, we get to pretty much it's a fashion show, so we get to have different looks down the runway, etc. And it's a really, really exciting experience, or I hope it is. And then junior prom is also on March 27th, and spring sports will be starting as of next week. So, like for example, boys baseball will soon be leaving to their annual trip to Florida next week, I believe. So I should be coming back next month with some really cool news and everything for you guys. And thank you so much.
Before I invite up Michael Catelli to talk about our Veterans of Foreign Wars recognition, I just wanted to share with the board that under facilities, you will see that you are approving numbers from September to December from the student safety data system that we have to report to the state, which involves data regarding HIV trainings. Berners High has had 2 in that period of time. Bedwell had 2, the middle school had 3, and then incidents of violence, vandalism, substance abuse, weapons, and HIV, which totaled 11 district-wide. So, without further ado, Mr. Catelli.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So some of our student reps talked a little bit about the Patriots pen, very humbly they did, and I want to make sure to give it a little bit more recognition because it is a great honor, the awards that they won. So it is a national contest that we have really grown through a partnership with a local VFW, that we've been able to see such success in our district, in our area. High schoolers take part in the Voice of Democracy, which is a speech contest, where they kind of produce a 4 or 5 or so minute speech about a topic, and at the middle level they write an essay about the same topic, and that's called the Patriots Pen. And as our students mentioned, the topic for both schools this year was what makes America great. And we have 2 teachers here, one from each school, who are going to speak a little bit more about the winners themselves and what it looks like at each school. But I do want to just give a quick overview of our collaboration with the VFW, because in the past few years, we have developed an amazing partnership and really grown this program. A few years ago, it was really only 1 or 2 awards. Mr. Miller and I were talking. We were saying a few years ago, we could remember only 1 award being given out, but they've seen so many responses from our students at all different grade levels that now the VFW gives an award to somebody from every single grade. So it's been an honor for them to be able to see a response from us, but we're so happy to be able to provide entries and kind of be able to work with our local organizations. And every year around January, they come to the schools and give out the awards to students. They give out certificates, the monetary prizes, but it's also a chance for the vets, many of whom actually went to our schools, to be able to speak with the students, talk with the students, but also for our students to ask questions and meet the vets that they're writing for and producing the speeches for. And actually, we've continued to grow this so much that the vets actually decided this year they're going to create a scholarship for graduating seniors as well. So it's just another way that we continue to grow this. And the last piece before I turn it over to the teachers is the vets always ask me to point out that this is all made possible through their poppy sales. So when you see them selling poppies outside King's or ShopRite, this is where it all comes back to. It comes back to our students and supporting, students in our schools and our community. And with that, I'm going to turn everything over to Ms. Angela Cerza to talk about the high school.
Thank you, Mr. Vitale.
Good evening, members of the board. I am Angela Cerza. 5th year, I have been talking about the voice of democracy, and my enthusiasm for this contest has not dwindled at all. As my esteemed colleague Michael Catelli has already announced to all of you, this year's theme, what makes America great? I use this contest as a speech assignment in my public speaking class. I feel very strongly it is an ideal way for students to appreciate the value of public speaking as a vital means for civic engagement and experience the power of rhetoric, and also the importance of effective oral communication skills. But more than that, this activity cultivates a unified sense of pride for our country. While many of the students discuss the importance of constitutional liberties, the winners here this evening wrote from the heart. They wrote reflective essays and delivered their speeches with passion and sincerity. They honored our veterans. They expressed appreciation for the beautiful landscape across our United States. They celebrated diversity, their family's heritage, their inspirations, and individual pursuit of the American dream. I couldn't help but reflect myself throughout the weeks that we devoted to this activity. And truth be told, had I written an essay, it would have been about the youth of America. I take great pride in being a public educator for my entire professional career. And I can tell you wholeheartedly, I am sincerely fortunate to have experienced firsthand the promise of this nation. Every day I come to Berners High School. You could feel it when we saluted the flag. It's true. To see these kids go above and beyond what they're called to do in their academic classes and come to reveal their best selves in a semester elective under the guise of the voice of democracy is truly a beautiful thing. And these 3 students here, unfortunately one student is not here tonight, they truly are a testament to what makes America great. And it is with great honor that I introduce the recipients to you. First, I'd like to introduce Charles Greco. He is our 10th grade winner of the Outstanding Spokesperson. Hard to believe I got that all emotional and whipped up when I had you after school. We were like working, but it all, I had a feeling. Grace Papa, unfortunately, is not here this evening. She's our senior 12th grade recipient. And what a joy to see a freshman win this honor. And it is with great pleasure I introduce my professional friend, colleague, Samantha Bender. Now, I'd like to turn the microphone over, podium over, no microphone, but I know you're big and bold.
Thanks, Ms. Cerza.
Mrs. McMillan, it's a pleasure to introduce you.
Always,
Thank you.
thank you.
And I do want to thank both of you for all of your enthusiasm for this, because I feel like, as Michael pointed out, we haven't always been doing this, and it seems like all of a sudden we're sort of
Our
got a lot of
superintendent knows because
enthusiasm.
she was in the trenches in middle school, and she knows sometimes at the beginning of the year it's very hard for students to sign up to do something extra when after 10 or 11 weeks of summer break, you have to get back into the routine. So thank you for
Teachers
saying
also.
Yes. So, what a wonderful opportunity tonight's Board of Ed meeting is, and I join with all of you to congratulate 3 Bernardsville Middle School students who are indeed quite humble, and they won the Patriots Pen. If you don't mind, I'm going to go from 6th, 7th through 8th and just say a little bit about each one. Whether you realize it or not, I'm here to tell you, 'tis a family affair with Nathan Lim. And before you panic and think that I am going to launch into song with this raspy voice of mine, just understand that's an illusion. Sly and the Family Stone from the 70s. So, in grade 6, the first year students are eligible. I know Mr. Catelli said, when you think middle school, you think 6th, 7th, 8th, and we do have 5th graders. And they hear about it, but they may not participate till grade 6. So the first year students are eligible. Our winner is Nathan Lim. Nathan. So to explain the family affair, 3 years ago, one of his older sisters, Bridget to be exact, won the contest as a 7th grader. And I know that because I remember mentioning her. And she also last year, and we were in the pack, a few more people attending, though this is a packed house. She won actually the Voice of Democracy and had gone to the county level. So just amazing. And for anyone who was at this year's talent show, amazing. But the first annual SHSD talent show, Mr. Lim, in his seersucker suit, demonstrated that he is not only a gifted writer, but also a great pianist. So let me congratulate, along with you, once again, Nathan Lim. And Ms. Cordero, who did a fantastic job, did not know that her friend's younger brother was a pianist as well, so that is my job, to inform. Okay? And I did see that my student's mom was happy that Princeton. Okay, so moving on. Ella, who was part of the student council along with Mr. Tober, she won and has the distinction of having won 2 consecutive years. If you can believe this, Miss Tressler, my colleague, had to wheedle Ella to enter. She had to coax her. And Ella is ever so talented, multi-talented, whether it's art, sports, writing. One of the nicest things that I can say is that when I announced to my students that Ella had won, I shared the news. The support was magnanimous. And that is quite a tribute. So, kudos to you. Now, I'm going to make Mr. Tober wait just a little bit, so I'm going to segue and I'm going to say, even though this year I didn't have the pleasure of having a student that I teach currently win, I'm here representing the I'm representing the middle school English and social studies departments. But the reason why Miss Wells, grade 6, Miss Tressler, grade 7, Mr. Porter, grade 8, the reason that we cajole, convince, or simply sign this essay is because we teachers at the middle school hope to foster the passion and interest that our high school colleagues will nurture for another 4 years. So we do this support. We know that the Voice of Democracy will continue, but we are really trying to ignite that fire. And once again, I'm representing the middle school, but we're doing this for our beloved colleagues at the high school. Now, John. This year's prompt, Make America Great, was a perfect interrogative segue for my former student counsel, John Tober, and here's why. he was able to share his ardor for our nation and its history. And anyone who knows John, he loves this nation. So, a few days before the deadline, an essay was mysteriously shared via Google. I found it in my inbox, and I'm using the passive voice on purpose. And when I read this essay, I experienced that visceral reaction we humans experience from time to time when words, music, etc. evoke a primal or instinctive response. You've got a winner here, I thought. And how happy I am that the VFW Essay Selection Committee agreed, bestowing this award on BMS's honorary American history aficionado. You didn't even know that existed, but yes, you did. So, John Tober, please stand and in closing, I know last year it was in front, and I just thank all the parents who share this double role, past and current parents who volunteer. And when we think about the VFW, and it is, I don't want to mess up the numbers, post 7858, you know, what an amazing opportunity for our students to see what service means. And I remember from last year, occasionally at lunch, John would talk about his grandparents' service. And I know that Mr. McDonald, your son, I mean, what kid knows about the Hanoi Hilton? And I learned about that through your son, you know, 2 years ago when they came to visit. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And we as lit teachers, you know, all the parents here know, when is that teacher going to grade that essay? So how amazing that without remuneration, these veterans read and they encourage when they come in their primary sources. So I will move on so that the rest of the board meeting can go. But I thank you all for your service, teachers, parents, etc., and for everyone in attendance, because this is what makes America great, is that you've got to be in it to win it for a contest, but you have to serve to really understand. And everyone here understands, because you're putting in these late hours away from your family, and that's why I am
Before I conclude my report and we get into the mundane aspects of our evening, if those of you who are here to be honored, you can sneak out, you won't, you know, it's okay. But before you leave, just kind of come up and maybe shake a board member or two's hand, because it does mean a lot to us.
Can I get one
For
picture
the
of all the
winners.
kids together?
Sure you can, Maxine.
Middle school winners to the front for a photo op. And then high school winners. And high school and middle school winners. Okay, ready, one? Make America great! You know, there you go.
See you guys next month.
All right, before we move on this evening, I want to respond to a few items that were recently raised. In December, the district's compliance with Title IX, you may remember, was publicly questioned. The board certainly takes seriously issues surrounding equity and access, and asked their attorney to review the district's practices and athletic offerings. The intent was to determine whether each sex has an opportunity to compete in athletics in a meaningful way, for this is the heart of Title IX. It should be noted that the application of the law does not require that all teams be offered equally or that there be equal number of activities for each gender. In regards to sports, Council has indicated that there are ample opportunities in Somerset Hills School District for students of both sexes to compete meaningfully, and that there is no evidence that availability of resources is limited for either sex. I would like to remind the board and the public that the district has and will continue to review the softer side of these issues, such as field access and practice schedules, which were included in the district's most recent 3-year comprehensive equity plan. Ultimately, the board's counsel has indicated that the district complies with policy 5755, equity in educational programs and services. On another note, I'd like to speak to a recent letter to the editor in the Burnetsville News regarding residency of students in our schools. In addition to serving as your superintendent, I've been a resident of Burnetsville for over 25 years. I take seriously my responsibility to serve the students and families of our district. I recognize that our school budget is sizable, and I'm humbled by the trust that the public puts in the educational services we provide. I work shoulder to shoulder with teachers and administrators each and every day to ensure our schools are the best they can be. Residency is an issue that seems to come up a lot, and I want to help us all understand that the residency of our students is verified in myriad ways. It's verified when students initially register for school. It was verified during the 15-16 school year for all students in all buildings when Somerset Hills School District engaged in a district-wide residency affirmation. We continue to verify residency when students graduate from Bedwell to the middle school and from BMS to BHS. And we now capture expiration dates on leases so that residency is verified when leases expire. The author of the letter in the paper indicates that the board must abide by the letter of the law, and I want to underscore that this is exactly what we do. A free public education from K through 12th grade is a right for all school-age children who live in New Jersey. I brought these as like Exhibit A, Exhibit B. This is 18A and 6A. These are the laws that govern schooling in the state, among others. The font is about a 6. There's a lot there. They detail a host of specifics surrounding residency. The guidelines are complex, and the details of these are included in Board Policy and Regulation 5111, eligibility of resident, non-resident students. This is what governs our actions. It's the law, and it's the same in every district in the state. And be sure that the district investigates situations when we have cause to believe that a child is attending school here without living in our towns. We have people who do that. I continue to hear concerns from members of the public about instances where people are rumored to drive to school from elsewhere. My message is simple and clear. If you see something like this, you have a responsibility to share it with somebody who can take action. I am the superintendent and I am that person. My phone number is 908-204-1930, extension 1311, and my email address is gdempsey@shsd.org. Call me or send me an email if you have something we should explore, and we will. I also continue to hear requests for the school to compare our data with that of the borough. But the rules governing rentals and housing in the borough are not the rules that govern public schooling. And students' records are protected by FERPA, the federal law that protects the privacy of student education records. It is unclear how a comparison of apples and oranges would help clarify anything, and I fear they would simply cloud things further. Finally, one small point of clarification. The author of the letter indicates $23,000 per student rate. While next year's budget is still being developed, and this difference may seem small, the average per student tax levy in last year's budget was $20,074 as contained in the posted budget on the district's website. I share all of this in an ongoing effort to be as transparent and accountable as I can be and this board can be. I have one more heavy-duty topic. I want to mention something about coronavirus. I know we're all concerned about the potential for an outbreak here at home. The district is monitoring CDC information and updates from Bernards Township Health Department routinely, and as of 6 p.m. this evening, I learned there still is not any report of a case in New Jersey. Our custodians have been following our flu season protocol for months. In addition to wiping door handles and frequently touch surfaces appropriately, this includes an electrostatic sprayer for disinfection in bathrooms and classrooms, and a fogger that runs in high-traffic areas. We encourage students and staff to employ typical hygiene precautions, such as staying home when sick and washing hands frequently. The district has been and will continue to post information through our Friday folder and employ alert mechanisms should the need arise. Administration and health staff is in close touch with colleagues across the county and state. Principals and school nurses are also carefully tracking attendance. Of course, we're mindful of the fact that trips are approaching, whether school-sanctioned trips within the country or outside international trips that our students may have signed up for. And spring break often means that families have trips planned. Please trust that the safety of all our students and staff is always at the heart of our decision-making. Our actions, should action be needed, are always guided by board policy, and those are available for anybody to check. Policy and Regulation 8451 speaks to the control of communicable disease. We will continue to communicate important information as we move forward. At this point, we are simply watching and planning. That concludes the report of the superintendent.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nancy. Public questions and comments for actionable agenda items. We very much welcome input from the public. Public comments are welcome at this time on any agenda item. Towards the end of the meeting, there is a second public forum on any topic. Please state your name and address. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, but an individual may speak a second time after all others who wish to speak on the topic have been heard. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board feels there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent may address the comment. In accordance with New Jersey statute, the board will not discuss matters regarding specific personnel. Public questions and comments will be limited to 30 minutes. Thank you for your input.
Good evening, Board, Madam President, Superintendent. Michael Long from 22 Crest Drive in Bernardsville. I would ask one minor indulgence. I would like to speak for about 2 minutes. I cannot stay till later public comment sessions. This is not about, I don't believe, if I'm being honest, an actionable agenda item. Thank you. So I come before you. I am the co-president of the football program in town. I'm the vice president of the lacrosse program in town. Many of you on the board have heard from me before. I'm coming to inform the board that this relates to the turf fee usage and the turf fees. The town has recently, the borough of Bernardsville has recently removed its fees for 2020. And we would ask that this board please take under consideration doing the same. There's been many discussions. I could go back over a lot of them. I'll make a few points and keep it to that for now. There are hundreds of kids in this town who could benefit from using that field. And that includes boys and it includes girls. And hundreds of girls are in our program, both in the cheer side of our football program and the girls side of the lacrosse program. That field, a field charge was installed, put in place. One of the reasons that was given was to try and save money to replace the field, despite the fact that there apparently already is money in the capital budget to replace the field, despite the fact that the field was funded in significant portion by donations and gifts, and despite the fact that my suspicion is very few users actually ended up paying the fee. They either didn't use it, football used it a little bit, and we do thank the board for its accommodation on our schedule. I would like to say that publicly, that the board was willing to work with us, so I do appreciate that. Football paid a little bit for it, and I'm not aware of any other program that used it or paid for it. And yet, every day, we would go out there and we would use the grass fields and look up and see a dozen or more people using the turf field, which is great. I think that's what living in a small town is all about. That's what it should be about. But instead, our local programs that are made up completely of students from the school district, our towns, refused to use that field because a fee was going to be charged. $55 an hour for anybody that doesn't know, $110 in a 2-hour block. Now look, we would like to be able to help find solutions. We're not asking for, I don't think we're asking really for much. We're asking for a chance for the kindergartners on up to be able to use that field pursuant to your regulations, pursuant to the times that we can use it, but to not have to pay, not to be a revenue stream or some sort of additional funding when we've all paid for taxes, we've all paid for that field. So we're just asking for a chance. We'd really like the board to reconsider that policy. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the indulgence.
Thank you for your comment.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cheryl Mataluna, and I live at 160 Old Army Road here in Burnsville. I have lived here for 30 years. All 3 of my children were educated in the district from K through 12, and they all turned out great. So I just want to say that I'm very happy with the school district. I'm not here to be critical of it, but I do want to bring to light a huge problem that us in the real estate community have with the perception of our school district in the eyes of the community. I just want to share one quote that I got, that I have from one of my clients, my relocation clients. I'm a realtor here in town. I've been a realtor for 10 years. The majority of my business is done here in Burnsville, so I know this area inside out. I talk to people on a daily basis about what their concerns are, what their frustrations are, and why they choose to live here, why they choose to buy here, and why they choose to buy elsewhere. So this was from one of my clients that was coming in from overseas this past week. She said, "I'm anxious to hear your thoughts about the schools. According to reviews online, it didn't score as well as others close by. Our kids have been at international private schools for 11 years. I want to make sure that they are great schools, especially because now we actually get to choose their school." And that client actually came here this week to buy a house and wound up buying in Tewksbury, mainly because of the reviews that she saw online. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Zillow. This is one of my listings here in Burnsville. If you pull up a house for sale in our district, if you go to the right, on the left-hand side, you'll see the listing, and on the right, you'll see the school ratings. And Bedwell receives a 6, and the middle school receives a 5, and the high school is a 7. Now, we all know that we have a great school system, but the perception to people coming into our district, this is what they see. This is a Zillow rating. I can't do anything about the Zillow rating. All I could do is change the perception of how our school is perceived within the community. And Dr. Dempsey was very nice, and I'm very impressed that she reached out to me on the Sunday after I sent her a ranting email, just so frustrated about, this was the 4th negative comment I got in 1 week from a buyer that decided to buy elsewhere, and I had had enough. And Dr. Dempsey, thank you so much for acknowledging me. I thought realtors were the only ones that worked on Sunday, so you made me feel better. And we want to work together with the school board and the school, and Dr. Dempsey had mentioned about a marketing campaign to brand our school so that people know all the wonderful things that our school has.
And I'm so grateful for your willingness to partner with us because Mrs. Butler has started that work already, and certainly, as I shared, I serve the community, but I live here too. And I think we have great kids. I know we have great teachers. We all work really hard. And if I could wave a wand and change that, I certainly would. But short of that, I think there are positive steps that we can take to change some of the buzz and what people who are inquiring and who have open minds, how we can provide them with information that would at least kind of balance some of that.
Exactly, and you kind of did that to a degree when I said the rating, the ratings were so low, and you explained to me the equity rating, which plays a large part into how our schools are rated, which has to do with how we, support the lower income students. And the problem is when people are coming and they're looking for a house, they're going here first, and this is what they're saying. And their mind is already made up. In 3 seconds, they know if they're looking at this school or if they're going to go to Baskin Ridge that has a 7, 8, 9 rating, or a Mendham that has a 9, 9, and 8 rating. So it's very hard to compete against this. So we have to come up with a plan, a branding campaign to overcome this, because our property values are plummeting. I mean, this year in particular, I'm just really struggling with the listings we have, and our values have decreased. And when I go to meet sellers for listing presentations, they're shocked when I tell them what their house is worth because we're just losing the value of our home. So,
And I want to thank the board for giving us the directive in the spring of last year to know that this was something that, you know, we could address, so.
well, I just want you to know I have other members from the real estate community here too, and residents that have said they would be more than happy to participate in helping a campaign. I think it's really important if we could have a program for realtors to explain to them how these ratings are and how we can combat it, because it's hard to explain when they catch you off guard.
Yeah, no, I get that,
I mean,
I get that.
they're looking at what they see on Zillow, and if I could, you know, crush Zillow, I wish I could, but they're kind of the king of real estate right now, no matter how you look at it, so, unfortunately. So, thank you very much.
Don't forget to tell them we're A+ on niche.
Yes, well, and that's the thing, I'm trying to incorporate niche
Right.
into my listings, but unfortunately.
I want to see if we can put it on our homepage. I don't
Yes.
know, I've reached out to them because I think at least, again, it will not negate what you're sharing, but it offers something else that perhaps gets somebody to think twice.
Exactly.
But we will definitely reach out to you, Cheryl, and if I can use you as my point of contact,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
Absolutely.
And we'll do our best to
Okay.
kind of change some of that.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other?
Good evening. I'm the one that wrote the letter to the, I'm Donald Crooks, I live at 96 Clark Road High.
Nice to meet you.
And like you, I am an educator, and a parent and a grandparent, and a 50-year resident of Baskin Ridge in Burnsville. I have a lot of concerns, which actually segue into this one. My main concern started out with downtown and all the empty stores. And I have, my grandchildren are the Tom's girls,
Know them?
and that's our aquarium in the middle school. My concern is property values, obviously, but it's also education and doing the right thing. And as an educator myself, I totally understand FERPA. I understand what you are all up against. And I understand that you probably should make about 30 times more than you do for the crap you put up with. I'm here not to complain, I'm here as a resource myself. Please, I will tell you now, you know, there's something people says, I hear this on, I don't know, Bill Maher, you know, I know something, I don't know it, but I know it. I know there are kids in this school that don't belong here. I know it. So my advice might be to do a cross-section, a small cross-section through SurveyMonkey or whatever, 5 or 10 parents in each grade level, to get the sense of who's dropping a kid off of here and not coming off a school bus and they don't live here. It's happening. The number that I put in the paper, $23,000, I actually got from a senior official, not in the Board of Education, but within the borough. So, and I do know, as again, about FERPA, well aware of it. I teach in college, and you can't do or say anything. But there has to be ways. I know Woodbridge had a study where they found 89 students that were there fraudulently. 89 times 20, a lot of money. That could go elsewhere. A lot of added strain on teachers. I'm an immigrant from Jersey City, and I was hoping that once I moved here, nobody like me would move here after me. But I think every child deserves every single bit of a right, but if they live here. If they don't live here, they shouldn't. And I don't know, and again, I know there's lines, there's barriers, there's Chinese walls between your data and what can be shared elsewhere, but there has to be something, and this comes down to some of the regards that they have about property values, is that a way to really find out who should be here and who shouldn't be here.
Sure. Yeah, I think, there's two aspects of it. One thing is, as Dr. Dempsey mentioned earlier, is that there are ways to, check on residency, and she's right, and I happen to know, because I've dealt with it on a few situations, when she's learned that there's a student that may not be living in the district that's pursued, there's investigations that are done, and that's what needs to happen. There need to be investigations. Sometimes they don't know, and then so they have to. But the district is doing what it can to track those things down. And if people report that they see a certain car with a license plate that's coming in and they think it's dropping somebody from out of town, you may be able to track that. So, and that may be something that could be done. There are things that the district can't do, because I know in some of the concerns that were shared with me that some people have in the community, and I'm not sure specifically if it was in your letter or in perhaps the realtor's letter or someone else's letter, but there are certain things that the district just can't do by law, and that is take into consideration the housing status of the person if they're in town. Like specifically by law, the district is not allowed to inquire whether their housing is legal, whether there's too many people living in an apartment, whether there are very specific provisions of the law that say we can't even ask about that, let alone take it into consideration. So certain things that people are concerned about, there's not much that the school district can do. It may be that the town, the borough could do something, that's another issue.
If you can't talk to the borough.
We can't really share, as you've indicated, we can't really share student information. Now, on the other hand, if there are situations where we've learned that a specific student may not be living in the town, it's a very different situation. If they're living here, but they're in what may be, not a proper town code housing situation, there's not much the district can do about that, because if they're living here, they're entitled to go to school here. But if we know that someone's coming from out of town and they're getting driven in from a different county and dropped off, and we find out about that, that is something that can be investigated.
If you have a two-family house and there's 6 families living in it, there's no way the borough can come to you and ask if these children are legal.
What the borough can do is a different question.
Okay.
The school district cannot even take that into consideration, and it's right in the law.
What did Woodbridge do with their study? How did they go about that?
My guess is, first of all, it's a much larger district.
I understand.
So when but my guess is they just did some sort of a residency reevaluation. I know the district did one a few years ago, and it sounds like the district's been doing it every year when people advance from one grade level to another. They're probably checking paperwork.
We're trying to close those loopholes. I mentioned the lease expiration date. That was something that, when I thought about it, if somebody is coming and registering legitimately as a child enters kindergarten, we weren't checking that child again until they moved to the middle school, they could have a lease that expired a year later. So, I think we are trying to do this with fidelity and honesty. There are forms on the website for people to fill in anonymously. People can send me emails and not even include their names. So anything that comes to my attention, I will look into. But to Mr. Cruz's point, there are just lines that we cannot legally cross.
Okay, I don't want to sound so bold, but a taxpayer, okay? So my tax bill is $35,000. I understand the Woodbridge study was $19,000. I'd like to contact the tax collector and say, take $19,000, I'll write a check tomorrow for $19,000 to have a fraud study done if you'll deduct it out of my taxes. It's going to the school one way or the other. Would you be against that?
I would be wary. I
Why?
would have to consult counsel. Because I don't know, quite frankly, anecdotally, what that would entail. And my responsibility is to assure that I am living by this guidance, that I am protecting the school system, that I am protecting the Board of Education, that I am conferring with their counsel.
Let me just say, some of the points you're making perhaps should be addressed to the borough council in terms of what's going on with housing in the town.
I don't want to take more than I'm over.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm like
Well,
Joe
once
Biden.
we engage you, we kind of have. But what part of the, from the school district standpoint, the town isn't going to have anything to do with the school district checking its own residency issues. That's something that the school district does and is in the process of doing all the time. And in terms of, as I said before, a big issue in the town, I think, is there's 2 things. One is talk about people coming in from outside of town.
Right.
But the other one is that there are a lot of students here that people perceive are not, there's too many people in the apartment. As you indicated, there might be 6 families living in a 2-family apartment. And that, from our standpoint, that's a totally different issue. That's one that really, by law, there's not much we can do about it. If the children are living in that house, they're entitled to come to school here. I'm simplifying it a little bit, but that's basically the fact. So checking them isn't going to have much impact on the school. Now, if there are people that are not living here who are coming in and just dropping the kids off and they live in Morris County or Essex County or someplace else, that's a different story. And that can be investigated, but you have to identify who they are and how to.
If the borough came to you with a list of potential names, are you allowed to do anything to check?
But I'd have to examine the situation if I could run it, but I don't see, would the borough would have, how would the borough have names?
If they go to a house where there's 6 families and there's only a 2-family house?
It doesn't matter. It really doesn't
They put their
matter.
head down in this town,
If they're
we're
living in the
obligated to
town,
educate them.
It doesn't matter, the law.
Whether they're paying rent or.
It doesn't
It doesn't
matter.
matter.
That's a town issue.
No, I understand, and I understand where your hearts are, believe me, but that is categorically wrong.
No, but that's the law.
That's the law.
That's the law.
Jim,
Can I, excuse me a second, I have grandchildren that live in Long Valley. Can I have them come sleep in my house and go to school here?
If they move to, it says if they're living with their parent or guardian.
Okay,
If they're
I'm
living
gonna have
with
my son, his daughter, my daughter, and those kids come and live in my house.
If they live there,
They can come.
if that becomes their permanent domicile, if that's their permanent residence, if that's where they're living,
Right,
and they're intending to remain,
but I have to prove that to you. I have to prove that to you.
right,
Correct.
yeah.
Other people, like I'm just talking about, would have to prove that to you as well.
Yes. Right, but the law, here, I'll read you a couple things. All right. A student's eligibility to attend school shall not be affected by the physical condition of an applicant's housing or his or her compliance with local housing ordinances or terms of lease. Okay, that's just a general proposition. A school district, a board of education shall accept accommodation of any of the following or similar forms of documentation, and then there's a list of things that the district can take. It includes signed letters from landlords, so if the landlord gives a letter that says that the people are living there, it can be deeds, it can be leases, but it doesn't have to be. And it specifically says in the law that a district board shall consider the information and documentation and shall not deny enrollment based on failure to provide a particular form or subset of documents without, so if, basically, and also specifically, we are not entitled to ask for documentation or information relating to compliance with local housing ordinances or conditions of tenancy. So this is just a couple things with the law. When you look at the law,
Your hands are tied.
they really are. The school district's hands are really tied if the people are living here.
And 99.4% of the students that go here are disenfranchised by that minority, not minority, that small de minimis number that shouldn't be here. And that small de minimis number that shouldn't be here could tilt your school budget several $100,000 either way. Okay, again, I'm not a malcontent. I'm a resource. But
I don't think anybody here would argue that if a student was attending our schools and they were not legally entitled to attend, that we would want to just provide that service out of the largesse of our hearts. That is not what we are saying. We understand that there are nuts and bolts and finances that go along with providing good education. What we're saying is, if they sleep here, they come to school here.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Brooks, I have to move on.
No, I'm done. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Great face to radio, I just wanted you to see it. All right, thank you very much. God bless you all too, by the way.
Jim, can I just make one, two quick observations? One is, with respect to leases used to demonstrate residency and the gap between the borough and the school district, wouldn't a straightforward, easy fix be that leases have to be certified by the town? Wouldn't that fit with the letter of the law?
No.
Why not?
No, because you can't even, you probably don't even have to have an actual lease. If a letter from an affidavit, a sworn affidavit from someone's living there, people can be living in the town many times.
Maybe we table that discussion.
Yeah,
For now, I think it bears further investigation.
I agree.
The only other observation I'd make is that we're not a variable cost basis budget, right? I mean, we have fixed costs that get amortized across the number of students.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, the math doesn't exactly work by taking a student and multiplying it by a number. It's just not the way the budget works.
Okay.
Hi, Jane McCready, 20 Page Hill Road. I am also a councilwoman in the borough, and I just wanted to, say to Dr. Dempsey that whatever committee or group you're forming, that I would love to be a part of it myself. I ran as a councilwoman under the Demand for Bernardsville slogan because I want to create demand for Bernardsville to help the realtors, to help our property values, and there's no better way to do that than working together. I'd love to increase our downtown and the people that are there and the businesses that are there, but I also love to increase our school rankings. So I'd be happy to join that.
Okay, any other comments on actionable agenda items? Some of those have been. They were discussed.
They were discussed.
So I'm Annie Ferrante, 43 Mullins Lane. I have 3 kids, all at the middle school right now. I'm also a realtor here in support of the whole action. And I just on Sunday had to defend the rankings. And I mean, for me, it's very easy to speak to the school because I'm in it. I'm on the board of the HSA for the middle school. I've got 3 kids there, so I'm very adamant about how wonderful it is. So I'm very cognizant of the issues, but not only was I praising the schools, I was praising you, Dr. Dempsey, and how...
And I told Cheryl, you can give anybody my phone number, which I know may sound like pandering, but you know what? If you have somebody who's on the fence and I would think that in some communities, the superintendent might not take a phone call from somebody to talk about how great the schools are.
And that's part of what I was applauding you know, to this potential incoming family is how wonderful you are about communicating and what wonderful things I'm sure you'll do for the school. But I would love to be part of whatever committee is formed too. So it's Gina prompted me. You can blame her. Thanks.
Mike Sullivan, 25 Stevens Street. A couple things, 2 points. One is with respect to residency. There are companies that do independent audits. Many companies, many towns have had similar problems because in New Jersey we don't allow, by state mandate, MLUL, doesn't permit vouchers. There are no vouchers, so you can't live in Newark and go to school in Belleville, not Lee. You have your restrictions. And it's the obligation of the school to ensure that people who go to the school live in town, notwithstanding anything else. And there is a company called Verify Residency that does this for a living, and they can be contracted with.
I reached out to them last year twice, they never responded to me.
Really?
For the record.
And then one other point is with respect to our neighbors, West Morris Central, West Morris Mendham, Bridgewater, Madison, and Summit, we are significantly below in low-income student percentages, students with disabilities, and the Hispanic population in terms of scoring. So I think these are areas that we need to concentrate on because we are well below, specifically Ridge as a neighbor in particular. And our percentage of Spanish and students with disabilities and low income, even though our percentages may be higher, the actual numbers, especially compared to Ridge, their numbers are, in true numbers, are higher, and they seem to be doing a significantly better job at educating their low income, their Spanish, and their disabled kids. So you may want to somehow reach out to them. Thank you.
Oh.
Hi, Chad McQueen, 15 Sycamore Hill. I'm also a member of council, and actually I was attending tonight in support of the lacrosse program. I'm also an executive on the baseball committee, so I have a joint view that we should start using our fields more freely. But hearing the conversation that I just heard that I wasn't planning for, I feel like I should say something. As a private citizen, and I'll try to be careful and speak what is on public record, because I also was the chair last year of the Housing Zoning Enforcement Board. And I sympathize. I'll start there. This is a very difficult question that has been posed in front of you. It was probably the first question that I was posed with as a new chair of that board and that group in January of last year. I ran for borough government last year in the spirit of transparency and accountability. And as head of that group, my first mission was to enforce all of our laws and our ordinances in a fair and even way. And it sounds like from what was said here, that is also your approach as well.
Absolutely.
However, there's a disconnect somewhere that I'm hearing. Because one of the things that we attempted to do as a group was to ensure that we were able to say clearly to our residents that, look, we don't believe there are issues of stacking in various places, or places where we have residents that aren't living lawfully. Now, is that perfect? No, we're governed by similar laws. Our book isn't quite as big as yours in what we can do and what we can't do. But I have to believe that there's a solution someplace. If at the borough we verify that a certain resident has been verified to have 6 or 8 occupants, and we as a borough believe that to be true, that number, I believe, should be matched with who's attending our school. And if it's different, we have to ask ourselves why. And is there anything that we can or should do about it? I know that that's a challenge. I know that there's cooperation that's involved. But I think as a town, I mean, right now I'm going through, as you are, through our current finances as a borough. As you know, they're hard. This isn't just about money, but as taxpayers, we're paying for our schools. We're paying for our residents. And this group, the reason I'm here was because I want my kids educated here. So I'll leave you with, I think we all have the responsibility to be accountable and transparent. I think if we have a problem, we need to solve it. And if there isn't a problem, which very well may be the case, we need to communicate that just as loudly. And I think that second piece, if that's the truth, will ultimately allow us to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Got a little off track from the actionable agenda items, but are there any other comments on actionable agenda items? We can.
I'm Meredith Panic. I am going to put on my HSA Green Team hat tonight and just say thank you. I see that there's a stipend being proposed in here for the garden, and I just want to thank you all. It's great.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second, thank you. Bob?
Any discussion?
Any discussion on the minutes from last one? Roll call.
Yes.
So, off the top. Sorry.
Can I just remind everyone to speak into their microphones? Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? If not, I'll do a roll call. All right, Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Brenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes. Okay. Bob? Finance and facilities.
All right, I'll do the finance report first. The Finance Committee met last Tuesday for 2 hours. First item we discussed was the garden stipend for Bedwell. We reviewed the job responsibilities, which are quite detailed and exhaustive, but it's a full-time job, and we thought it was appropriate to offer a stipend for maintaining the Bedwell garden throughout the year. So we directed the superintendent to go back to Shay and negotiate an appropriate stipend. And you'll see on the agenda tonight, we have a stipend for approval of $5,000 for the entire year. So we will post that after we approve it, and hopefully we'll get somebody who wants to do it for that. The second item we discussed was the middle school sports program, and the superintendent did an exhaustive research project to look at the cost of the middle school sports from what we pay and what the revenue streams are and number of participants. And the goal, this is part of a strategic plan that we came up with, is to look at middle school sports to align it closer to what's at the high school. We had a long discussion about what she came up with. There were a lot of options. it's gonna take further discussion and review. We're looking at fees at both the middle school and the high school. We're not sure where we're gonna land, but more will come on that. I think we've made good progress, and I thank the superintendent for spending so much time tackling that project. I learned a lot, and I think the rest of the board will be happy wherever we get to. The next item we talked about was the budget, which obviously is on everybody's mind. The Finance Committee got our books. We talked about what was in the books, and we looked at the second draft of the budget. And Heather and Gretchen went through the budget line by line, looked where we could save money. And so we reduced the shortfall, we hit the 2% cap by a lot. And right now, I think we're gonna make it because the state, if you read the paper this morning, the governor proposed $336 million more to schools. So we should get some amount of that money.
I think Heather thinks tomorrow
I'm
is
trying
the
to be
day.
just as optimistic.
We will know tomorrow.
Tomorrow's the day.
We will know tomorrow. I want 100,000 minimum, but, so we'll find out tomorrow. And as far as healthcare premium, if it remains flat, like our insurance broker is telling us, with 100,000 from the state and that, we should be okay. So we'll make the 2% cap. If we get more than $100,000, we can give it to other people. But I don't know. So at next month's board meeting, we will present the final draft of the budget to the public. And then on our April meeting, we're going to have a public hearing on the budget, which is required by law. And then if it's satisfactory, we will vote on it and approve it at the end of April. We also reviewed a request from the parent group that runs the ice hockey program for the Bernardsville, the Middlesex and Somerville schools, and they would like some more funding for another coming year. So we said, why don't you come talk to us next month and we'll see what we can work out. So they will be visiting us next month. So on the agenda tonight for finance, you'll see there's a resolution for gov.deals, which is a way to get rid of surplus school equipment. It's an auction. It's sort of like eBay. So if we have a camera or microphones that we don't longer need, or a podium or anything like that, we can post it. Whatever the bid wins, the buyer pays 7.5 above, and we get 5% less. So gov.deals gets 12.5%. Seems fair, because it's equipment we would normally dispose of anyway. So you'll see on the agenda, we're going to prove that to be a formal process. Also on the agenda is the Bedminster tuition, which it's the estimated tuition at $18,200 per student from Bedminster. Both RBA and their BA work closely to get the numbers as best they can. And I think we owe Bedminster $16,000 from the previous year. So it's like income tax, so we true up. So we owe them $16,000, which is not a bad number. That's pretty close.
These are a lot smaller.
A lot smaller, so. And then there's 2 fundraisers on the agenda, and they both came in on time, and they're both fine. So I will move action items 1 through 11. There's one item on the addendum.
2.
Or 2, I think.
Yep, 10 and 11.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on any items?
All right, roll call. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Brenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes. Okay, Bob.
On facilities and operations, we met for 30 minutes, one of the shortest meetings we've had in a long time. So 30 minutes, bam, done. last Tuesday. So we reviewed the final capital project list. So our capital outlay is going to be $692,207. The biggest item up for capital next year is the generator at Bedwell, the emergency generator at Bedwell, which is $275,000 estimated. So on the agenda, you'll see we're authorizing our architect to go to bid, and we'll open the bids in April, and hopefully we'll be something below 275, but we'll have to see what happens. The other part of our capital projects will be other maintenance items for about $85,000. We got a report back on the vultures. Jake. Vultures are gone. So I think
No harm was called to stay.
I think the vultures have migrated somewhere else, so we're happy to see that. We'll be on our toes next November when they come back. We looked at the YMCA contract. The YMCA contract for aftercare at Bedwell, we decided to just do a one-year contract for this year. We thought about a multiple-year contract, and they might want to use it on holidays. So the contract we're approving is just for this year that we're in, so we're kind of through it. And they're not going to do any holidays when the school's closed. So once we get probably next May or something, we might try to get a contract written for the next 3 years. So that'll make life a lot easier. So that's on the agenda, and the student safety report that we heard from the superintendent is on the agenda. So I'd like to move action items 1 through 4. Yes, 1 through 4. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Okay.
All right, roll call. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Brenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes. Okay, curriculum items.
Okay. The curriculum committee met on February 18th. Attending members, in addition to myself, were Jenny Lees, Nicole Cooper, Sam Frenda, and Sarah Nathans. Attending administrators were Gretchen Dempsey, Colleen Butler, Dan, and Michael Catelli. The first item we discussed was the approval of field trips, and all field trips were approved. Next, we went on to spring musical ad approvals. So the committee approved most of the spring musical ads. The group questioned including an ad from a local wine store. And since the policy committee meets right after the meeting of the curriculum committee, a decision was made to review the policy at our meeting. Also, an ad placed by an individual was political, and there was consensus that the ad did not seem to belong in the playbill. So later on, policy will discuss that. The other thing we talked about was just a time change of the March meeting from 9 a.m. to 10:15 a.m. for curriculum. After that, Principal Amy Fallon reviewed Bedwell's Code of Conduct for Student Behavior. Amy explained that the standards are woven into the Bedwell's Character Ed program by using identical vocabulary. The standards are reinforced in the students' report cards and are also repeated as reminders in Bedwell's morning announcements. The purpose of Bedwell standards is to promote a safe and caring environment. If there is a mishap in the student's behavior, it is important to understand that the goal of the school is to teach children that there's a better way to to behave. The committee was impressed with the positive behavior supports chart entitled "Be Part of the Chain Reaction." The chart clearly shows positive behaviors in various situations. I really thought, we all thought this was really good. It is a chart, and it just really encapsulates
children's behavior and, you know, what to do, how to behave, how to react, and everything's right there in a concise way. Then the committee began and will continue to review Michael Catelli's ESL board presentation for the March meeting. Thus far, the committee found it extremely informative, and I believe you will too when you hear it. In an effort to subsequently to approve the 21-22 school calendar, the point was made that Labor Day will be later than usual again. More to come. Then data was presented that 84% of the BHS students surveyed do not want the testing schedule to continue into the third marking period. 73.6% of 106 respondents indicated that the testing schedule increased their stress level at the end of the marking period. The committee agreed with the administration's decision to eliminate the testing schedule. So I would like to move items 1 through 4 on the agenda and items 3 and 4 on the addendum.
Second. Discussion. Does everybody understand the testing schedule? Okay. What Dr. Nigel had tried to do in an effort to reduce student stress was to say that, like just a simple example, very simplified, all math tests have to happen on Mondays, all science tests on Wednesdays, so you didn't have a bunch of different teachers giving you tests in every subject on the same day.
And he was doing it just at the end of the marking period for a couple of weeks, but what students reported was that, first of all, any student that was taking more than one class in the same content area was suddenly like, okay, I'm taking 2 science classes and both my science tests are the same day. There was also a sense that teachers felt more able to negotiate previously, so that if the student said, listen, I have 3 tests that day, I'm really feeling overwhelmed, a teacher could say, okay, let's figure something out. Whereas now this was sort of like, all right, this is the discipline I'm in, this is the day that's assigned to me, I don't have that flexibility anymore. So it's always nice, I think we are all committed to gathering feedback, and it's nice when what you learn is very clear. This was not it was sort of like, nobody really likes this, it's not working, the way we intended it to work, so
But
we
the
pulled the
intent
plug.
was to reduce stress.
We had a good, Haley was very great last month, because she said, I appreciate that people ask us and that you listen, but nobody thinks it's really working, so
Right.
we go back to the drawing board.
So that's what that was for anyone who didn't know it.
I just have a couple of questions. The behavior chart that you referenced, Janice, so is that behavior chart tied to Rachel's challenge?
Yes, I would say it is loosely as opposed to definitively tied. So Rachel's challenge kind of anchors everything. If you look at the chart that Janice has, some of those letters are used around the chain idea. What's nice about the chart explicitly, and the code of conduct is bigger than that, but this was the part that I think we all loved, is that it is very focused on positive behaviors that should be exemplified in various settings, especially settings that are less structured. So what does good behavior look like when you are in the bathroom, in the cafeteria, out at recess? So the hope is that, it's very definitive.
Yes, and the children hear the same vocabulary, the same words, and hopefully it all sinks in. And just so you know, it's, the first one is be considerate and helpful, the CHAIN, okay? Be considerate and respectful, be helpful and responsible, always be safe, include others and show kindness, and never give up. So it's good, and they do, as Gretchen was saying, they depict different behaviors in the specific areas that the children are in. So I think it's really a great way to work through this.
It's nice and anchored.
Yeah.
Rachel's challenge. And I was just wondering, how long have we had Rachel's challenge?
I would guess 5 years.
5 years, okay. So the thing that I'm just thinking about, and I don't know that this would work, but I know Bob and Jamie, we attended that program at school boards, and there's the Dylan's Wings program. I'm just wondering if at some point, and not, you know, when where it falls appropriately on a priority level, would that be something that could maybe layer in and we could take a look at? Because what I loved about that program, and I'm not necessarily saying one would replace the other, I think they might, we'd have to do our research. Was that was so student-driven. And really, because that was one of the biggest things he talked about, was that they were getting pushback, that teachers just couldn't take on anything more.
Right.
So they really worked hard to create it into a program that was run by the students.
Gotcha.
And so I was just thinking about that in tying it, if we ever could look into maybe tying that into.
Certainly check it
Yeah.
out.
And Heather, I think we have to take just an item of business, G, number 3G. Can we take that off the agenda? That's the training I can't attend.
Yes, you want to make a motion to remove.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to remove 3G from the agenda.
And I need a second.
If everyone's in agreement with doing that, you could just, as by acclamation, just do that.
I can't attend that.
If there's no opposition to doing that.
There's nothing, no one.
That's fine. We're not gonna force you to go. All right.
I have a dog.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Roll call. All right, Mr. Baker?
Yes, except abstain on 3E. I can't approve myself.
Okay. Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes, but I need to abstain on 3F and 3DDD. Otherwise, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, where are we? We are on personnel. Heather.
Okay, so personnel, we met on February 18th for about an hour. It was a relatively short one as well. And just a couple of things to note today. We will be approving the interim supervisor who will be temporarily replacing our retiring supervisor of special services. And she will be in this position through the end of the school year as we find the permanent replacement. And as we do, and I kind of report out on this monthly, this time of year, we are constantly looking at our incoming demographics as it relates to enrollment and staffing needs, and so we continue to look at that. Dr. Dempsey also informed us that she is looking at certification of all of our staff through the lens of CUSAC. And finally, we discussed our legal counsel's advice for how to accurately reflect positions being eliminated on our board agendas. So, in personnel, I will move items 1 through 13 and 5 and 14 on the agenda. Second. Any discussion?
Okay, all righty, roll call. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes.
Okay. In policy, and I'm sorry, I didn't mention that, everyone was in attendance. Bob Baker replaced Kathy this month with our new alternate process. In November, we discussed our policy encompassing vaping, and we discussed at that point, we decided we wanted to keep it as is and that we would look at it again in the future, early in this year. So we did discuss it again, and once again, we feel like we would like to leave the policy as it stands at this point, and administration is, very supportive of that. We just agreed to move our March meeting time by an hour and 15 minutes, just to accommodate,
We're going to the HSA meetings.
Yes.
For the supervisors to present on curriculum.
Okay, so that's great, and that's no problem. And finally, while it wasn't an agenda item, we discussed a residual question from curriculum regarding a couple of ads that they did not approve. We wanted to look at the policy specifically, and that policy is 6163, advertising on school property, to make sure that we were in compliance with our policy, which we determined we were. We have our policies in second reading, and I'd like to move item number 1 on the agenda. Any discussion?
Yeah, we heard from several members of the community tonight about the policy for charging for access to our fields. And I think that the policy committee and this board should reconsider our field use fee policy relative to the changes that have been made by the town council. We've talked about this extensively last year. We tied our fee structure relative to the town, and now that the town has eliminated it, I believe we should eliminate ours. So I would be happy to introduce a motion here to eliminate those fees. We can work on the language, I'm sure, with council to do such amendments to the policy for field use fees. But I would introduce that motion here now to fully eliminate the field use fees as instituted last year.
You want to have the policy committee discuss it?
I'm introducing a motion, we could have someone second it and we could discuss it.
Well, actually, there's a motion pending right now. Isn't there a motion in a second?
Well, yeah, we haven't voted on all of this. This is
No,
separate.
no, I understand. But right now, there was a motion pending for the items that are on the agenda.
Right, and I'm introducing.
Right, so, right, but we're in the middle of a motion. So we could do a motion to amend the motion, but I think it's a motion to, sounds like it's a motion to amend the policy.
That's what it is.
All right, so in order to do that, that would be and apparently your policies need 2 readings, I don't have your policy in particular. So it would have to be, there would have to be a motion to amend the policy, you'd have to have the policy language that you want to amend in order to pass that motion. I just think right now we're in the middle of considering motions on these other policies. You certainly can make a motion, that motion isn't really related to the motions that are on
the timing.
The timing of it, it's not really related to the current pending motion.
Right, but this is the appropriate time to introduce that motion.
Well, it could be introduced new business, if there was a new business activity.
So we can vote on the motions on the table, and then you can introduce
That would be, you could also do it then.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, that makes it clean, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so any discussion on the agenda items?
All right, so
Okay.
I'll do a roll call on the agenda items then.
Good.
Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Brenda?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Nathans?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tober?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes. Can we do that in supplemental matters so that we can
Sure.
go through the rest of the agenda?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Community relations.
Community relations.
Actually, we have an organizational item
What is that?
to put Gretchen as the ESC representative.
Oh,
So we need a motion to do that.
Motion
do
to,
that.
can I make it, or?
Sure.
Okay. Motion to make Dr. Dempsey the ESC delegate.
Second.
Second? Second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Any discussion about that? All right, and then I'll do a roll call on that one then. Mr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Frenda?
Yes.
Mrs. Lees?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald? Sorry,
Yes.
I'm in the wrong place. Ms. Naismith?
Yes.
Mrs. Santoro?
Yes.
Mrs. Tover?
Yes.
Ms. Virtue?
Yes.
Mrs. Rye?
Yes. Okay, Sam?
Now community relations. In Kathy's absence this week, I am going to be reporting out on conversation taking place in Community Relations Committee. We met on the 21st at 4 p.m. and the meeting went for about an hour and 15 minutes. The board members in attendance were Heather Santoro, Pat Rye, Janice Virtue, and myself, and Dr. Dempsey was also in attendance. Matters that were discussed. The first was we had Michael Catelli come to discuss the upcoming census for 2020, and he reported out regarding the district's work in making sure that all families and students are aware of the census. And throughout March and April, there will be ongoing instruction across curriculum areas about the census in student classes. The SHSD is working with both the county and New York, New Jersey state census offices to ensure that there is proper education and the greatest degree of participation possible. So everyone will be receiving their census forms in the mail between March 12th and March 19th this year. Everybody. Everybody will be getting them in the mail.
Get ready.
And Mr. Catelli informed us that it's a little bit different this year. You're going to be getting a card that's barcoded. And that code will be used online to fill out the census. If you do not fill it out online, then you will be receiving paper to fill out. And then if you don't do the paper, potentially the census person is going to come knock at your door.
It could be Pat Rye.
It could be Pat Rye. So in doing our part to try and increase participation, the district will be holding a census information and assistance night on March 19th, which also coincides with the bilingual HSA's monthly meeting. And that'll take place from 5 to 8 p.m. Dinner will be served thanks to the partnership with the HSAs, and translators specifically who have been trained by census workers will be on hand to properly administer advice and assistance, since each individual has to fill out their own census and no one else can do that for them. So the end goal is to get as many people as possible to complete their census there. The appropriate technology will be available, and everyone who attends that meeting needs to bring their card with them. The public library will also be working to get the message out, to inform the community, and to bring in the different communities who may need assistance in understanding the process. The next thing that we discussed were the branding efforts that were touched on with our realtors who spoke, and that is something I believe that was part of an initiative to develop a marketing plan for the district, and that's in an effort to create greater communication between the district and the community. And Dr. Dempsey has been in conversation with a company who specializes in all aspects of school branding. And a first step in this process would be them coming into our district, and they have in-house professional photographers and writers, and the end goal would be to create a newsletter that would be mailed out to every member of the community and be available for dissemination to all community stakeholders. And ideally, this first newsletter will go out by April of this year. And then we also discussed thoughts regarding the calendar for 2021-2022. And as Janice reported in curriculum, the Labor Day will fall on September 6th that year. And in our discussions in community relations, we discussed following the same pattern as was approved for this year, with a proposed first day, the Thursday before Labor Day, with the teachers coming back on September 1st. And that conversation is going to continue. There were no definitive things that took place. And then we discussed the strategic plan renewal, which is going to be coming up on March 24th with a snow date of March 26th and a second meeting on April 15th at 6 p.m. The meetings will be facilitated by an NJSBA field representative, our field representative. And the idea is, again, this is community engagement, to bring community members and stakeholders to the table to inform the administrative team on matters of importance as we move forward and allow them to create action plans to attain defined district goals. There were no actionable items that came out of the meeting, and in regards to the strategic plan, the hope will be in discussing with the HSEs and different organizations in town that they can also promote community participation.
Now we have supplemental matters.
Okay. So, under supplementary matters, I would like to introduce a motion to amend the policy, to make the necessary amendments to the policy related to field use, to eliminate the fees that associated with the local group's use of the fields. So if there's a second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
So now we discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it needs to go back to policy, the wording, I'm concerned about the wording, Tim, that I think we should direct it, go back to policy, because we spent a long time writing wording. I'm worried about custodial time, overtime, because it's a big number. So I think if the board tells policy to review it and try to meet.
We can have that
their
discussion
goal,
here.
But we still need to look at this document, because it's 4 or 5
We
pages
could pull
long.
up the language.
But
Well,
I
our
think,
policy also has 2 readings, so.
2 readings,
So
so.
we could have our first reading now.
Oh,
I mean,
so what's the
I
hurry?
just want to make sure that we're not obfuscating.
No, we're not
That we
obfuscating.
stay intellectually honest about
And-
the fees associated with the use of these fields,
Right, but I think.
which was directly tied to the borough applying field use fees for Veterans Field. So we can refer it back to policy, I'm okay with that, as long as we stay intellectually honest, we just clean the language up
Right, I agree.
and we remove the
I think
fees.
we would have to actually vote on whether everybody agrees. to
Yeah,
do
I think that,
and just be.
I think we
This is a
definitely
discussion.
discussed the fee for the town. However, there was a much broader discussion and a lot of factors that played into it, which I'm not opposed to taking a look at and discussing. But I think to say that we made that decision solely based on what the town did, if I recall, we had a lot of different input and conversation around those fees. So I'm happy to discuss it and, you know, talk with Gretchen about when we can get it on policy. Obviously, we can, you know, look at the schedule
We
for
can
that,
put it
but
on the March agenda, that's not a problem if that's the decision of this group.
yeah. But I do think that we just need to take a look at it and go through it with a, you know, eye on all the decisions that we made and then come to a reasonable agreement. That's my impression. I would not necessarily be in favor of making a change on a fly after we spent many, many months discussing that last year. But that's my thinking. We can vote.
I agree with what you just said. You can't just all of a sudden, well, we're just gonna change the policy. You know, we put a lot of time and effort, thought, discussion, and I think if we change a policy, we need to do that again.
Just respectfully, the fees were instituted in response to the fees introduced by the borough. They were not independently raised by the committee or by this board. So I'm happy to have it go back to the policy committee, and we can have an open discussion in the next board meeting. It's fine.
So do we need to change the motion then?
You made a motion.
Yes, right now there's a motion pending, but if someone could just make a motion to amend the motion to refer the matter to the policy committee. So somebody would make that, or if the movers would
I'll
agree.
withdraw the motion.
If the mover, if there's no objection.
I'm happy to withdraw the motion.
If there's no objection.
Refer it to the policy committee.
That's fine.
And have an open discussion at this board in the next board meeting.
That's fine, as long as there's no objection to that
That's
motion
fine.
being withdrawn, that's fine.
I have a supplementary matter.
Okay.
The timing happens to be great because there was so much conversation tonight that touched on the matters of equity. On Saturday, February 8th, Heather and I attended an NJSBA board training on equity in Montville. And the training, I think that there are so many things going on in district and our community that this is very relevant. The training laid out the importance for board members in understanding the differences between equality and equity in our educational policies and practices. Equality means we're providing the same things, resources for all of our students, where equity ensures that we are providing what is actually needed for all of our students. The message was that the districts can't achieve excellence without equity. Our goal as a board should always be to make sure that all groups of students master the goals of the curriculum to approximately the same degree. And as a board, we need to recognize the value of the diversity of persons and groups within society. In today's world, that goes beyond the differences in populations that we can see, like gender, race, ethnicity, etc. It also needs to address the effects of adverse childhood experiences, which include things like trauma, poverty, gaps in education, social circumstances, anxiety, depression, and so on, and the effects that this has on our students and their access to school success. Boards of education should be scrutinizing data to identify where there are achievement gaps, and it was very enlightening to learn that we should not only be using this data to determine what our curriculum and classrooms may be missing, but also what barriers and obstacles we could potentially remove to create and increase greater access points to achievement expectations for all our students. I think that's something really important. I think a lot of the board's time is, and our superintendent's time, administration's time, is focused on what we can add, things that we need to continually do. And there is a lot that we could potentially look at that is in existence now that could be removed, that could create greater access. And I thought that was a really important notion. Another notion of acceleration versus remediation was discussed and highlighted how we can create programs or structures which don't require additional resources to set children up for success instead of remediating when set achievement levels are not met. This requires a shift in the way we as adults think. This should not be viewed as a problem to be fixed, but rather an opportunity to benefit all of our students by valuing this vast diversity. This should be the lens through which we are evaluating our policies and practices to impact the most effective and beneficial changes for our district with the goal of having all children succeed.
Is there an online version of this program or any materials that you can share with us?
I have the presentation that I can share with you, and I have the materials that they handed out. The speaker was phenomenal, and
Do you think you remember if there's an online, like if they have a recording now?
No, I don't think so.
There wasn't an online version. I also was just at training, the governance training, and there were materials on equity there that I can share with the board.
Equity has been a push for the Commissioner of Education for the last year and a half, 2 years. Certainly when you talk about that access, I think that's the best lens you can kind of think about. When we look at programs, I think transportation is a great one to consider, because sometimes you think about, well, we have something available, and then you think, well, can kids get there? So I think from an administrative standpoint, I will tell you those are things that we always talk about. But I appreciate that perhaps that was a new message as a board member.
Yeah, and I just think it's also an ongoing conversation for all of us to have in our committees, and when we're discussing things, making sure that we're looking through it through that lens, that equity lens. But there are a bunch of materials that I can pull together.
Yeah, and I certainly, appreciate too that you guys are living and breathing this all the time, and sometimes it's just, when going to this training was eye-opening to me from the standpoint of my responsibility as a board member to kind of take that into consideration, because I think sometimes without a real deep understanding of equity, you may not look at it through the lens, certain things you may not think would fall under that umbrella. And so I think that it really opened my eyes to having that perspective really across the board. And like Sam so eloquently kind of summarized, it's really a mindset that we all have to kind of embrace, and that excellence that we want to achieve really we can't get there unless we're constantly looking at our equity across all of our students. So it was great, and Sam is right, the speaker was phenomenal. There were like several, I think they were conducting several equity trainings in all the different regions. So based on where you were, you had a different speaker.
You got lucky.
That's what they told us, right, when we got there, and I thoroughly agreed. He was really a phenomenal speaker and had a lot of great
Oh, and there's also a link to him.
Was he a superintendent?
He's a superintendent of Newton Public Schools. And he's been superintendent of several different districts, but with a lot of different makeup within each of those districts. So he had a very broad perspective too. It was great. And thank you for summing all that up.
Any other supplementary matters from board members? Okay. Public questions and comments on non-agenda items?
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Jeff Falzerano. I'm a resident of Peabody and a high school English teacher here, senior English teacher here, and the head baseball coach. And well, some of you probably know I'm back. First, I want to just comment. There's a number of things that were discussed tonight that I could comment on in a variety of ways as an educator here and a parent here. And I applaud some of these, a lot of these ideas in accordance to looking at equity and thinking about some of our disadvantaged students. I think that's an amazing thing. And I heard some other things brought up tonight that I need to comment on, and it covers the realm of budget and field usage. I have a lot of concerns and questions as a member of this staff, of this school, and as a coach here about how some of the budgetary aspects are delineated and where the monies are allotted as far as facility maintenance is concerned, as far as athletic department is concerned. I know more recently, Mr. Hoppy and Rufus Vaughn have been doing a wonderful job trying to get some stuff done with the baseball field and the lower field. The maintenance guys have been working their tails off on certain aspects of it more recently, and some of you recall me coming here last fall, I think it was the fall, and talking about that. The overuse issue is a huge issue for that lower field. I don't know how we avoid that. The turf helps. I do realize in many cases, because it's just baseball and softball down there and otherwise used as practice facilities, we might be a little bit overlooked when there are so many programs that use the turf. So many programs that use the turf. We don't have access to that. That is our only place. And when we are not there, we're in a gym. And a former athletic director once said to me, you can't play real lacrosse in a gym. So they need to use that field. And I said, well, you can't play real baseball in a gym. So there are significant problems down there. I would encourage all of you to put your boots on and take a walk. It is a mess. And I know I don't even think we've had an inch of rain in the last couple days, and it's like a marsh right now. Whether it's a drainage issue, or a field maintenance issue, or whatever, it is unplayable, and we begin our season a week from Friday. I don't know what we're going to do.
Is it getting worse, Jeff, than it used to be?
It's most definitely getting worse. I do think that the drainage that was done with the wall and the French drain has helped the infield portion of it. I believe that to some extent. But the outfield is atrocious. And I'm also concerned about how the budgetary aspects play into that and the timing of such, because we're freezing our budget. We're all aware. And no clay has been ordered to be put on that infield. And they just groomed it, dug it out. So now there's a bit of a lip there that needs to be, every year we need to get a truckload of clay to maintain that. Why it waits till March to be ordered, I don't know.
You sure Doug has, because I talked to Doug about it, and I was under the impression, and I'm not discounting what you're saying, that he had ordered it. What I don't know is from an ordering perspective, is it one of those timing things where you've got to time the delivery and the placement with the other work that you're doing?
Well, I know there's an issue is where they store.
And you're the expert, I'm not discounting what you're saying.
No, I don't know that I'm totally the expert.
Well, you are. You are, between the two of us, you are.
I have a few more ideas, and I have done a little bit of research. I do know that there's a storage place for the clay, and there's issues with having that piece of it delivered because they store it in the same place that they store the salt. So when they have the pile of salt there, they don't get clay in until they put it there. Now, clay could be stored somewhere else. Clay could be put on a field in the fall. Doesn't have to wait until this time of year. There is a settling process that occurs, but it means that it has to be spread and dragged and set in the fall. If they don't do that, it's a pile of clay that freezes. right, depending upon our winter. And then who knows when that's gonna, right? So there's a timing piece with that. Additionally, we know we've had a pretty mild winter. And in that mild aspect of it, and with the fall teams that were practicing below ending fairly early, there was time to do work on that outfield, to even throw seed down before it froze. None of that was done. And now we're still talking about the idea of ordering seed or possibly getting seed, which really isn't going to do a lot at this particular point. But I'm sorry to say, from a budgetary aspect, it might be worse than we think. And if we dig it up, I'm sensing there's a drainage issue. And that brings in a whole new realm of problems for all of us. Because we don't want it dug up in April when we're playing on it. And it's used in the summer a bit for our wine. I implore you, I've been here before. I don't like coming and laying things out at you like this, but it really needs to be looked at. I do believe that moving the youth programs up there will help, but we still have spill out. We still have football practices down there when the turf is being used. We have field hockey practices down there when the turf is being used. It gets beat up. And now, this is in hindsight. We would have been better off turfing that than one field above. Because that gets so much more use than you can even imagine than that turf field gets. Because of the way we've pushed people down. It'd be easier to maintain. I'm all for it, by the way. If you want to turf that, by all means. But I know there's a chain of command that needs to be followed. I know that from the budgetary aspect of things, everything doesn't go through Mr. Hoppy in accordance to the field usage, and I do believe that's an issue. I also know that my budget for baseball, like every other particular program's budget, is incremental in getting anything in that respect accomplished. I just learned that there were certain aspects of things that needed to be ordered from my end, not necessarily through a facilities end, like our fencing goes through my baseball budget, not through a facilities budget. So that's not Mr. Hoppy's doing, that's the way everything is arranged and set up. He's been doing whatever he can. Rufus has been doing whatever he can, has been speaking with me at least twice a week, trying to do whatever they can. And I just feel like their hands are tied. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Thank you.